Hey everybody, welcome back to the John Morris Show. It's Monday, March 31st, and in this episode we're going to talk about the 5 stages of coding career development. But before we get into that, if you're not familiar with the podcast, the John Morris Show is a podcast dedicated to coders and talking about the things outside of technical skill and click here, do this, and code this, code that, in order to help you with your coding career. So if you haven't yet, I encourage you to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss out on any of my pearls of wisdom. But seriously, I want to thank everybody who's already subscribed. If you haven't subscribed yet, I encourage you to do that. You can do that on Stitcher, your iTunes, if you like Downcast or Instacast. You can head over to johnmorrisonline.com/John Morris Show, and you can get all the details on exactly how you can subscribe. So again, I encourage you to do that. And thanks for everybody who's already done that. So in this episode, again, we're going to talk about the 5 stages of coding career development. So here's the story behind this just a little bit. So again, I always like to relate everything to my personal experience to give you some context around, why I think this is so important and what it actually means or would mean or could mean in your life. And so again, I think the best way to do that is just describe my own experience. So, one of the things that when I was coming up as a coder, as I started to get the technical skill kind of figured out, was struggling around starting to look at what I was doing with my career as a business. And, honestly, you may not even be at that point yet. You may not be at the point where, you necessarily view what you're doing as a business. Maybe to you, it's still, somewhat of a hobby, or it's something that you're testing out or trying out. And so maybe you're exactly where I was, but I can tell you from experience that you will reach a point where it becomes about being a business. It becomes about getting serious and what we call going pro, meaning going professional, doing it full time, it being your career and your business. And when you get into that, then all of a sudden you kind of start to reanalyze everything that you've been doing, and you start to look back at the steps that you've gone through and making sure that you've taken the right path. And that's kind of where I was. I was at a point where I really wanted to go professional. I really wanted this to be my full-time career, but I was still kind of in the hobbyist mindset where it was something that I was doing that I was just I was making a living off of, but I was just happy to be able to make a living off of it. And I wanted to take it to the next level to where I really had it figured out, where I was a professional and everything was, I just had a lot more control of what was going on. And so as I got into that, then, I started, like I said, retracing my footsteps, looking at where I had been and what I was doing and how I could get the foundation correct. And as I did that, and as I've gone along, I've come across what I call the 5 stages of career development. It's the different stages that you'll go through as a coder. And even if you don't know these stages, you're going to go through them naturally. But knowing them and knowing what your focus should be at each stage helps you to get through each one a lot more quickly. And it's especially important because I believe, I know because I've seen it and I've been through it myself. Most coders actually do this in the wrong order. And it really hurts you because you end up spending a lot of time doing things that really aren't that important to you, really aren't what you want to be doing, really aren't what you should be doing. And as you start to go go pro and be a professional and really take your business to the next level, that can really hurt you. And so I'm going to go through those steps so that you can understand, what order you should take these in and how to correct that first misstep. Now, fortunately, correcting that first misstep is actually pretty easy. Not necessarily the first step itself, but understanding what the misstep is and then how to change it. All right. So let's go ahead and dive into the 5 steps of coding career development, or the 5 stages, and then we can kind of talk about all this a little bit more specifically. So the first stage is discovering your passion, right? And this is the step that most coders, when they start out, they skip, because they go right into learning how to code. And it's difficult because you don't necessarily know enough about coding to be able to discover your passion. So you do have to kind of start coding and start mastering your craft a little bit. However, as you're doing that, you should really be paying attention to what it is that you are most passionate about. Sometimes I think we get caught up in looking at what other people are doing, looking at what people say we should do, and we can forget about what it is that we really want. And here's the thing. If you really want to be successful as a coder, if you really want to turn it into a business and make it something that's long-term viable for you, it has to be built around something that you're passionate about. So the nice thing in the coding community or in the coding environment is that can be almost anything. So, one example I would use is my little brother. My little brother got into coding because he was passionate about helping artists who, they had this really great talent for something, whether it was traditional art or was maybe some of the more new age art stuff, whatever it was, they were really good at it. But they had no idea how to do some of the things that are necessary in terms of putting a website together, building a flat platform, getting your voice out there, and so forth. And so he got into coding because he wanted to solve that problem for those people. That's what he was passionate about, and that's what drove him through all of the long nights, all of the headaches, all of the roadblocks, all of the frustration. Was his passion for what it is that he wanted to do, his vision for what he could bring to the table for other people. And the thing about it is if you don't have that passion, if you don't know what that passion is, if you haven't explicitly defined it and know exactly what you're doing, it can be easy to give up in those moments when things get tough. And things will get tough. And you've probably already experienced that. Things get hard sometimes. It gets emotional. It gets frustrating. It can feel like you're never going to get this figured out. You're never going to get your head around it, and you're just wasting your time. It can really feel like that. And if you don't have a good sense of why you're doing it, those moments can be the moments where you give up and quit. And the problem with that is it's fine if you don't want to do coding. If you really realize that, this isn't for me, then it makes complete sense to move on to something else. But what happens, and this is the contrast between my experience and his experience, is because I did this several times, is if you don't have a good understanding of what your passion is and why you're doing it, then in those moments you can give up. But if you really want to do coding, you find that you come back to it. Maybe it's months later. Maybe it's weeks later, maybe it's a year later. Whatever it is, you come back to it. And what happens is those gaps really slow you down. They really hurt your development. And you would have been able to avoid them had you discovered, what your passion was, why you're in this game. What is it that you ultimately want to do? Maybe for you, it's, building the next big thing, whatever that is. Maybe you've, and I'll admit to geeking out on this a little bit. You watch a movie like, for example, The Social Network, right? And you see the process, even though it's obviously dramatized, you see the process by which, Facebook was created. And it's kind of compelling. It makes you kind of want to be a part of something like that. So maybe that's your passion. Maybe that's what you want to do. Maybe it's not a social network. Maybe it's a phone app, or maybe it's a niche social site, or whatever it is for you. Maybe that's why you're in the game. And so that you have to understand what that is and where it is that you ultimately want to go, because that's what's going to drive you through those moments. Right, so that's step one, discovering your passion. Some of the questions you can ask yourself to help you uncover your passion is, what is the most important thing to me? What is it that matters most in terms of a career and coding? What is the thing that I'm most passionate about? What's driving me the most to even want to do this? And it can be something as simple as, I want this to be my career. I just want to do this for the rest of my life. It can really be that simple, but you need to know that. You need to understand that and explicitly define it. I highly recommend writing this down somewhere and keeping it around for those moments when you start to question what you're doing, and remind yourself why you're here. Okay, so what's the most important thing to me? What do I want to do most? And probably the biggest one, what gets me emotional? It can, and it doesn't have to be any specific emotion. It can be anger. Maybe there's something you see out there in the coding community or on the web or just in the world in general that coding can solve, and it makes you angry. Makes you angry that problem exists, or that thing is happening, and you feel like something you can do with coding can solve that, and you can be the one to solve that problem or correct that situation. So it can very definitely be anger, or it can be sadness. Maybe you see something out there that you just think is a tragedy, and it makes you emotional to the point of tears when you look at it, and you think that coding again can provide a solution. Or maybe it's joy. Maybe it's just the pure joy of coding and of building things. For me, that's a lot of it. It's just the pure joy of building stuff. As a kid, I was the kid that would always playing with Legos and building things and trying to get my dad to get me wood so I could build this or that or the other. I remember even as a kid, one time I had in my mind I was going to make up a new board game. And I don't know why I settled on a board game, but I was just going to make up a new board game. So that was always just me. And so I code really for just the pure joy of it. It's something I would do even if I wasn't getting paid to do it. In fact, I did it for a lot of years without getting paid, right? So again, it can be something just as simple as that. So what gets you emotional and gets you worked up, right? And again, specifically define this, write it out, put it somewhere where you can see it. All right, the next stage in your platform or in your career development is mastering your craft. And this is the one that most people skip to. Most people start off trying to be good at coding or being good at some specific thing. And so, you're probably pretty familiar with this. But if you get step one right, it makes this stage a lot easier. And in this stage, your focus is really about just doing the work. You can't, in this stage, you can't get too wrapped up in trying to be too perfect. That's probably the biggest piece of advice I can give you for this stage, because you're never going to be perfect. Even when you get really, really good, yes, you'll be closer, but you'll never actually be perfect. And in this stage, you need to make a lot of mistakes. The thing you try to do is just minimize the damage that those mistakes have. But you can't be afraid to make mistakes. You just need to put in the work, put in the time. And again, a big piece of advice is just build stuff. If you can take on clients and actually build stuff for them during this stage, that's really the best way to learn, because it's going to teach you what it is that you need to learn in order to be able to deliver for clients, and also help you to understand what you really just don't like doing and what you really enjoy doing. And it's going to really help you hone what your passion is, and then becoming the best at that. Will Smith has a great line about the fact that talent is given and skill is earned. And he talks about beating on your craft, which means you just practice, you just do it over and over and over and over and over again. Just do the work to be the absolute best in the world at what it is that you're passionate about. Okay. And so that's the mindset you have to have. Not, I'm going to be decent, I'm going to be good enough, not even I'm going to be great. I'm going to be the absolute best at this in the world. And then just beat on your craft. Just keep doing the work until you get to the point where you are the best in the world at it. All right. Stage 3 is what I call finding your voice. And so this is when you start to kind of take the next step, and this is kind of where you start to really get serious about what it is that you're doing. And finding your voice in terms of your passion has to do with your point of view and your perspective. What is it that you feel, and how can you help others when it comes to whatever your passion is. So again, for my little brother, his passion was centered around helping other artists, to be able to create a platform, to be able to deal with the technical stuff, to be able to get their message out, get their art seen, so others could experience it. And so when it comes to him finding his voice, it's about, a lot of it for him was about explaining to artists the importance of doing this stuff. Because if you've ever worked with anybody who's really artistic, a lot of times they kind of have the mentality of, if you build it, they will come, right? So if I just keep doing really good at my art, then eventually people just beat a path to my door. And in today's world, that doesn't happen so much, because there's so many people out there probably doing the same thing that you're doing. You really need to carve out a space for yourself, and you really need to do some work in terms of getting your voice heard in order to get people to come to your doorstep. So, a lot of his voice has kind of coalesced around this idea of really communicating the importance of this kind of stuff to artists. For me, I spent a lot of time doing just really technical tutorials, and kind of felt like maybe that was my voice, but there's always a part of me that wanted to do more. And honestly, this is, finding my voice, and the next stage, which is building your platform. Those are really kind of the stages I personally am still in. There's a part of me that's still kind of finding my voice and building my platform. And so, a lot of what I've been doing lately has been moving from just doing pure technical instruction, which I think is still a part of me and still a part of my voice, but also getting into some of the stuff I'm talking about now, because I've always been a business-minded person. I've always been into sales and marketing and things like that. And so that's a part of my voice as well. It's something that's important to me. It's, it has to do with my experience as a child, and, watching my dad struggle at times with his businesses, and just always having this sense of wanting to get that figured out for him and for me and for others, and to be able to have to be able to teach people about business. And so, again, that's part of my voice. That's part of who I am. And, lately I've been moving towards allowing that part of me to show. I've kind of, kept it to the side a little bit, because it is easy, when people hear you talking about marketing yourself and branding yourself, there's a lot of that goes on online that's underhanded. And so, it's easy for people to just dismiss you offhand when it comes to that. But, I've kind of got to the point where I know that the stuff that I do for myself really works, and I really want to help other people do the same. And I see a lot of coders struggling with it. I have coders I work with who are phenomenal coders who struggle with this part of it, and they suffer because of it. So, again, a big part of it is just wanting to help people and letting that part of my voice come out. So it's the same for you. What is it that you have to say? What is it, your point of view or your perspective when it comes to your passion, and how can you help others the most? What do you have to say that you think they need to hear, or they want to hear, or that will help them? And figure out how to communicate that to people and tell your story. Because at the end of the day, people want to hear what they have to say. They want to hear your story, and the world needs your voice. It needs what you can bring to the table. All right, so that's the third stage of career development. The fourth stage is building your platform. And this really goes hand in hand with finding your voice, because in order to find your voice, you're going to be putting out content. And as you do that, it can help you to build your platform. And also having a good platform will help you attract the people that are going to help hone your message and hone your voice. And so building your platform is about attracting your ideal tribe and getting your voice heard. It's about reaching the people and connecting with the people that can most benefit from what it is that you have to say, from your voice and from the value that you can offer. And so your platform can take on many forms. Obviously, it will include things like your own website, but it can also be things like Twitter, Facebook. It can be, it could be really anything. If maybe you're a photographer, it could be Instagram and posting photos there. It's anywhere where you can reach and connect with the people who can benefit from your value and what you have to say the most. And so think of your platform as kind of a conglomeration of all of those different things, of Twitter, of Facebook, of your website, of your mailing list, of maybe Instagram, or maybe you find a way to use something like Snapchat or Vine. It's the conglomeration of all of that. It's the integration of all of that into a mechanism that when you have something to put out and you have something to say, you have a place to do it that will allow you to connect with those people and get that message heard. Okay, and so platform building can be, it can be one of the most beneficial things that you do. It can be because it's what really ultimately allows you to make that transition, kind of complete the transition from being a hobbyist to being a professional. Because when you have a platform that can reach tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people, you can really do the next step, which is serving your tribe. You can really do that in some powerful ways, in some ways that will allow you to do it as a full-time career, and make serving those people your tribe or your job. And that's really the point that you want to get to. Okay, so when it comes to building your platform, it's about getting on the different channels. It's about finding out where your ideal clients hang out, where they're at, and then how you can communicate with them. The big thing that you kind of have to try to avoid is a lot of people think of a platform and they think of things like Facebook and Twitter as distribution channels, right? As places to just post links, essentially. And what you really need to get into is understand that those places are communities where you get to be a part of or create a community of like-minded people, of ideal candidates, and interact with them and actually create connection and community with them and get to know them and understand your audience and what they're thinking and what keeps them up at night and what motivates them and what they want and what they need and so forth, so that when you get into the fifth stage, you have a really good idea of how to serve those people, right? So that's step 4. And then the fifth step is serving your tribe. And the fifth step or stage is really kind of about an ongoing thing where it's really a conglomeration or the climax or the ending of all of the other stages, meaning you're still doing all 4 things, but you're doing it in such a integrated and precise way where it's all about serving your tribe. It's all about giving them exactly what they need and they want, and you spend your entire life doing that, And that is your job. Your job is to serve those people. It's to help them. It's to, help them through their stages of whatever they're going through, and just really understand them and help them get the results that they're after. And you essentially spend the rest of your life doing that. And that becomes your job, your career. And you are now a professional at that. And so you really have to nail all of the other 4 steps in order to be able to do the 5th stage effectively. You can't serve your tribe if you don't know what your voice is, or you haven't discovered your passion, or you haven't mastered your craft, or you don't have a platform from which to serve them. So, it's the culmination of all of the different stages, and it's doing it, day after day after day after day, and making that your job and your career. All right, so those are the 5 stages of career development. And, again, knowing what to focus on in each stage then helps you to move through each one more quickly, instead of just kind of haphazardly stumbling through it like I did. And that's why things took me a lot longer. And so I don't want you to have to go through that same thing. So what I recommend you do, your challenge from this podcast is, to look at those 5 stages and try to get a sense of where you're at. And look back at the previous ones and see if maybe you've missed something, or there's something that you can do better. And actually write it down. Put pen to paper or keyboard to screen, however you want to say that, and write it down. In fact, if you head over to johnmorrisonline.com/John Morris Show, find this podcast and this episode, and leave your comment on where you think you're at and what you need to focus on, and what your passion is, and what your voice is, and just tell me about where you're at and what you're doing with your career, because I'd love to hear it. And it's also going to help you to put it out into the world, to put it down somewhere in physical form, and make it real, and actually to write it down somewhere. So go ahead and again, look back through those 5 stages, and figure out where you're at and what you need to be focusing on, and how you can get through the stage you're at as quickly as possible and get to the next step. And again, I'd love to hear more about it. So head on over to johnmorrisonline.com/John Morris Show, find this episode, and let me know what you're up to. All right, so that does it for this episode of the John Morris Show. Again, thanks for listening. If you haven't yet, I strongly encourage you to subscribe. You can head over to johnmorrisonline.com/John Morris Show, and you'll see all of the past episodes. You'll see all the info you need for subscribing, and so on and so forth, all the different apps that you can use, and get all that information there to get yourself hooked up and subscribe so you don't miss any episodes or any of the pearls of wisdom that are coming your way through the podcast. All right, so thanks again for listening. If you'd like to connect on the interwebs, you can find me at JP Morris, or on Twitter at JP Morris, Facebook.com/John Morris Online, Google plus John Morris Online, or johnmorrisonline.com. All right, thanks for listening, and I will talk to you in the next episode.